What's going on, ladies and gents? Welcome to Just the Worst Podcast. This is episode number 20, to be perfectly precise. I'm your host, Billy Donnelly, whose work you can find at joblo.com. This is Infamous, and of course, right here at Just the Worst Podcast. So it's been a rather interesting week. A little bit slow as we start talking about the movie industry. Everyone's out in Park City, Utah this week, taken into Sundance Film Festival. And all the films that are now introducing themselves to the world. And while we're not going to see a number of these films for many months, this is the time where you sort of take stock of what's out there. Take stock of what the people in Utah are checking out, what they seem to be digging, what seems to be developing a lot of buzz around it. And you just sort of tuck it away in your movie memory up in your head for down the road this year, later this year, so that when a film comes up, all of a sudden you go, oh, wait, I remember hearing about that one. Didn't that one play at Sundance? Didn't a lot of people really seem to like it? And from there, you go out of your way, seek them out. Granted, it sucks to not have a chance to witness some of these movies until far down the road after the initial excitement for them is there. And after hearing it, look, here, and for me, having so many colleagues who are out at Sundance, you start to almost get tired of hearing about certain films, or the hype for certain films is so great that it's almost impossible on a number of levels to sort of hit the level of excitement that people have already generated for a film. You go in and you are already expecting something amazing because you've heard how incredible this movie is. So in that way, the long road to get to a film can sometimes work against it. But you know, that's not going to stop us from watching things. We're still going to go in hopeful and optimistic, rooting to get quality cinema out of it. Just this is one of those cases where patience is a virtue. We have no choice but to sit back, relax, and wait. And wait. And wait some more. But one day we'll get the good ones coming our way. And really that's what all these film festivals are all about, is giving these smaller films that aren't big budget tentpoles, giving them their day in the sun, their moment in the spotlight, their chance to show that it doesn't take $250 million and an established brand and special effects coming out the ass to make a successful movie. Sometimes it's the great ones that seem to come out of nowhere. One bit of newsworthiness to come out of Sundance, though, and that is the purchase of The Birth of a Nation by Fox Searchlight for a record-setting $17.5 million. Birth of a Nation, the story of Nat Turner, the black slave who led a slave rebellion in Virginia. This is Nate Parker's film, and from what I've heard from people who have seen it, it is pretty incredible. $17.5 million for any movie at a film festival is a lot. I mean, that's a lot of cash to be tossing around. And there seems to be a lot of a lot of money being thrown. I think Netflix actually bid $20 million for the film, but as we saw with Beasts of No Nation, the focus on having the film on Netflix in very much a day and date situation makes for a tough road for a major motion picture if it's looking to A, make a lot of money, but also B, to be in the position towards the end of the year to be in the Oscar conversation. So I think that's one of the reasons they went with Fox Searchlight, to sort of line up a guaranteed sizable theatrical release, as opposed to with Netflix, who is making very big strides as far as major motion pictures are concerned, but with the focus still on their own streaming content model, doesn't really lend itself towards legitimizing a film through theatrical measures, which is still an old school mentality, but a mentality nonetheless that still sort of permeates throughout the industry. So as a result, in that respect, taking less money on a bid for a major studio to have a hand in distributing your film, as opposed to Netflix, which is still sort of figuring it out. That may be the smart move there. There's really only one thing I want to get to, as I mentioned, with Sundance going on. Not a lot trickling out through the industry, so really not a lot of newsworthiness, I guess. Real heavy news to sink our teeth into and discuss as far as what's coming, what's going, what's happening. Everything seems to be focused on Sundance right now and everybody watching those films out there. One major piece of news, though, to talk about, and this is something that we've discussed, I think, last week on the show, really something that's sort of lingering over the industry as a whole, and that deals with the Academy Awards. Now, this past week, since last show, the Academy announced some new rules moving forward, some major changes going ahead that they hope will alter the way that films are nominated and voted on, sort of on the fly, tweaking and reforming a bit their voting body. And while some have looked at this and said, well, it's sort of reactionary to a lot of the criticism being tossed at the Academy for being too white, too Caucasian, the Academy, at least, give them credit for this, is making a valid effort, being proactive in a number of ways, to try to increase diversity amongst its membership, and as a result, what that membership may choose to recognize. Now, once again, I have said on this show that a film should not be nominated in order to fulfill some sort of quota. I don't believe in an affirmative action for recognizing the best in the world of film. We can discuss affirmative action in a number of other places as a legitimate means to giving opportunity to those who otherwise might not, and sort of leveling the playing field. But when it comes to award ceremonies, recognizing the best, I don't believe that that's the way to go. Once again, this is an industry-wide problem as far as giving minorities and people of color roles of substance consistently, as opposed to just having handfuls of films. And by handfuls, I mean probably one. Enough that you could count on one hand opportunities to really showcase in either a prestige film, a film the Academy would sort of gravitate towards, unless gangster films or slave films, as we've seen in the past number of years, which is really the only type of films that the Academy seems to recognize when it comes to African Americans. So I wanted to discuss some of these rule changes, the reaction to some of these rule changes, and my reaction to the reaction for some of these rule changes. So here's what the Academy is looking to do in order to sort of, once again, make their membership much more diverse, with the goal that they specifically stated is to double the number of women and diverse members of the Academy by 2020. Now, what does diverse members mean? Well, that means people of color, minorities, gay, lesbian, transgender, anything that's not white dudes, in this case, is really considered diverse. So they're hoping to add more diversity into the overall membership. Now, there's also a change to who gets to vote now. Previously, once you were in the Academy, you're in. You could die in the Academy once you're in. You could be in the Academy following one movie, one contribution, one major contribution to offer up Academy membership, and then never do anything again. And you would be in the Academy with an opportunity to vote on the Oscars. Lifetime membership. So what they're doing here now, moving forward, is really making you work for your lifetime voting rights. With each member's voting status lasting a 10-year period. So if you've been involved in the film industry at least one time over the course of a 10-year period, then you're good for those 10 years. And then it would go on to the next 10 years. You work once within those 10 years, and you're good for another 10 years. And then another one. It goes to then another one. And that's how you stay there. Or, I believe you've been nominated for an Oscar, you get to stay. If you've won an Oscar or been nominated for an Oscar, you get lifetime voting rights. And if you have managed to maintain involvement in the film industry during those 10-year terms, 3 10-year terms, you also have lifetime voting rights. Otherwise, you can't just be in the Academy at one point in time, never do anything again, and then just coast along voting on the Oscars. That's how it's going to work for new members, and that's how it's going to work retroactively for people who are currently in the Academy. So there's a possibility that if you've been in the academy for a long time, but you haven't done shit in forever, the academy is going to say to you, I'm sorry, you can't vote. You cannot be an active member of the academy. You can move into emeritus status, in which case you don't pay dues, but you're a member of the academy. Problem is, you don't get to vote. You don't get to vote in that respect. In addition, they're going to try and find new members of the academy and offer membership. Once again, in order to increase diversity. So it's not just going to be current members sponsoring new members as it's always been. They're going to go out of their way to see who they can find that really helps mix it up. Change up what the academy looks like. By offering new membership to people that otherwise may not get it. And like, here's one of those cases where you look at it and say, wow, well, isn't that sort of fulfilling a quota of some sort? Well, yes and no, I guess. The problem is that as the current system stands, if you're an active member in the academy and you want to sponsor somebody new, who do you typically sponsor? It's the same thing like if you nominate somebody for something. Who do you typically nominate for a recognition? It's usually somebody you know, maybe a friend. Could be a colleague, somebody whose work you respect, but usually you have some type of connection to them. Well, it's sort of hard to diversify your membership if the people you know aren't very diverse. Now, I'm not saying that there's something wrong with who the academy chooses to associate with. I'm just saying that at that point, if you're not all that familiar with a diverse crowd of people, you don't really have a large pool of diversity to possibly put up for new membership of the academy. If you don't have any black friends, or Hispanic friends, or Asian friends, or gay friends, or lesbian friends, or transgender friends, or for that matter, are familiar with any of those demographics, ethnicities, groupings, anybody in those groupings, their work, once again, you don't really have much of a pool to pick from. People tend to stick with what they know. I know all these people. They happen to be white males. I'm going to nominate from them. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with who they choose to be friends with, who they connect with. It just means they don't have a lot of variety out there as far as the range of their friendships or their colleagues to go ahead and launch for new members of the academy. And the way that we look at this now, because I've been watching the reactions come forth, and you have some people who look at it and say, well, this is a really great thing. It's progress. Is it perfect? No. But when are there ever really going to be perfect solutions? There's good enough solutions. Solutions that you look at and say, at least they're doing something. Will it completely solve the problem? I don't think so. Is this a step in the right direction? Yeah, most definitely. Once again, being an industry-wide problem with the lack of diversity that we see in Hollywood films, that's something that studios need to take into account when they're casting a film, when they're selling a film, when they're putting a film together. Packaging it. When it comes to the Academy Awards, when it comes to the Oscars, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences can only do what the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences can possibly do. And this is something that they can actually do. Now, it's a shame that it took heavy criticism against the Oscars this year for the Academy to say, let's figure something out. But in that same respect, without such an uprising against their ceremony this year, their nominations, nothing would have gotten done. So is it reactionary? Yes. But sometimes that's the only way for something to actually happen. Now, when you look at the changes to who is going to be a part of the Academy, this is where people are now starting to draw lines in the sand, take up sides. Because once again, I've seen people look at this and say, this is something good. And I've looked at people who said, this is horrible. And usually the people who think that it's horrible are the people whose memberships are now in question. The people who thought they were just going to coast this whole time. The people who now find their voting privileges within the Academy threatened. And they claim ageism. Well, I don't work anymore. I'm not involved there anymore. I do something else. I don't make movies anymore. Which is perfectly fine. But guess what? You then just don't get to be an active member of the Academy. And why is that such a big deal for you? Does that make your life? The voting? Is that all you have left to hold on to? Is that your identity? Voting Academy member? Because if the Academy is something that you hold so near and dear to your heart, it means so much to you, then you would look at this and say, this is for the good of the Academy. Because that's ultimately what it comes down to. Ultimately, what this comes down to is reshaping the Academy for the future. For the betterment of the Academy moving ahead. So that when people look at the Academy, look at the Oscars, look at who is nominated and who ultimately wins, they can say that at least that winner or those nominations are representative of society in the movie industry as a whole. Not, well, it's not my Oscars. And there's not really a case of ageism here, as some people have now tried to pivot this issue in criticizing the Academy. This is simply a matter of getting rid of people who aren't involved anymore. Eliminating the lifetime pass. And saying if you want to be a part of this, then you actually have to be a part of this. Look, I operate as a film critic. I am a part of the Online Film Critics Society. I have membership there. As a result, I also have voting rights when we cast our ballots for the annual OFCS awards. Just because I get in one time doesn't mean I get to be in the OFCS forever. I still have to maintain my membership by participating in the group. As a film critic, I need to continue to contribute to the world of film criticism in order to maintain my membership as an active member. Why? Because that's how it works. I don't get to get in once and then get a lifetime pass forever. And then when I die, maybe I could will it to my kids or something so they can vote. That's not how it works. As a member of the Academy, you should have to be an active member if you want to take part in the active part of what the Academy does, i.e., voting for the Oscars. I mean, look, I get it. I get that you look at this and you go, I feel threatened. But that's just part of the way it is. And you can complain about it all you want. It's not going to change it. You see, baseball actually did something similar in recent years. Now, it wasn't in the name of trying to diversify who was involved in voting. In that case, it was for the Baseball Hall of Fame. They just did it as a way to sort of restructure who was a part of the Baseball Writers Association of America electorate. In order to sort of keep things active and maintain some level of integrity for their voting board. And this was in 2015 this happened. So I'm going to read to you the change, and then you could say, oh, look, it rings a bell. It sounds familiar. Because what they did was they've required, and this is the Baseball Writers Association of America, votes for the Baseball Hall of Fame. And what they required was for potential Hall of Fame voters to meet certain requirements as active members covering baseball. That potential Hall of Fame voters all had to be 10-year members of the Baseball Writers Association of America. They either must be 10-year members, hold an active Baseball Writers Association of America card, or have held active status within the last 10 years. So there was even a 10-year grace period given to those who are no longer active to either get active or walk away from their voting rights. Previously, once you were sort of in, you could be in there for a while. And they gave an opportunity to people who, if you're no longer active or you're removed from active status, could apply for reinstatement based on being active the previous year. Once again, this comes down to people not just being around forever, but to have an active body that is representative of the industry at that time. Baseball did it. The Academy is now doing it because it's very similar. It's a similar idea to have your voting body electorate, your active members, actually be active. And not just people who were in once and are now continuing to reap the benefits while they don't do shit. I'm sorry that your membership is being threatened. Sometimes, to make an omelet, we gotta break some eggs. There's gotta be a sacrifice that's made. And you're it. It has nothing to do with ageism. It's just, you might be old. And you don't work in the industry anymore. And I'm sorry we're taking this away from you, but you are no longer an active representative. It doesn't make you any lesser of a human being. It doesn't minimize your previous contributions to the film industry. It just means as we move forward into the future, as we restructure, you can't get by on something you did a long time ago. And I'm sorry if that upsets some people, but that's just the way it is. It's like that in every aspect of our lives. People don't get just lifetime passes. If you buy a pass to go to a theme park 1 year, you don't get it forever just because you bought it once. Every year you got to re-up. If you want to continue to maintain the active benefits of that pass. You join a club. You got to be an active member of the club. Can't just keep coasting. And I credit the Academy for making these changes. Will they make a world of difference? I don't know. I think they help. I think once again we still need to go back to the movie industry as a whole and look at what roles are being offered to people of color, what opportunities are being given, and not just in a performance sense, in writing sense, in directing sense, scoring films, costume designers, cinematography, sound engineers, and sound mix. I mean, up and down. And figure out how to make more movies involving a much more diverse industry. That's the way to truly move forward and make progress here. That's the way to allow the Academy to vote on films and performances and showcases of talent that are representative not of just the industry, but of the world around us. We're a diverse world. The Oscars don't really look it. And why? Because that's just the way that the industry has worked for too long. And we need to get our hands dirty and change some of that. And that's how we'll really make strides moving forward. That is how we'll have a movie industry that looks like all of us. That is how we cater entertainment for everybody. And with that, that's really all I have to say this week on this particular episode of the show. Short, sweet, to the point. That's how I roll right now. Make sure you check out all our social media outlets, profiles, whatever it is that you want to call it. Hit us up on Twitter at JTW Podcast. That's the official podcast handle of Just the Worst Podcast on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter at InfamousKid. And also make sure you follow our larger group at Tis Infamous. That'd be the official Twitter for This Is Infamous at Tis Infamous, T-I-S Infamous. Over on Facebook, hit us up, facebook.com/justtheworstpodcast, facebook.com/Tis Infamous, and of course myself, facebook.com/BillyTheKid. SoundCloud.com, that's where all the podcasts can be found, SoundCloud.com. Just do a search there for Just the Worst Podcast, and all of our various shows and episodes will come up for your listening enjoyment. That means also grab yourself the SoundCloud app for your mobile device, and you can pull us with you anywhere you go. Just put us right in your pocket. It'll be good to go there. All my work you can find at JoeBlow.com. This is Infamous. And, of course, right here at Just the Worst Podcast. I'll be back next week with a brand new episode talking about, well, whatever comes across my desk and gets thrown my way. But in the meantime, I've been your host, Billy Donnelly. This has been Just the Worst Podcast, episode number 20. We'll be back next week. I'll see you. Have yourself a good one. I'm out. Peace. Just the Worst Podcast, episode number 20, has been a presentation of Just the Worst Podcast Media.